Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We're a couple minutes early, so we're going to give everybody a little bit of time to trickle in before getting started up. Looks like we have a few more people trickling in. For those of you just popping in, I'm going to give it another minute or so to let people pop in, and then we'll get started. All right, it looks like those people joining us slowing down a little bit, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm looking forward today to introducing our new IMPLAN Canadian Sub-Provincial data. This is very exciting for us because it is hot off the presses and was just released yesterday. I'm Eric, the Director of Education Services here at IMPLAN, and I'm joined today by Ashley Bickel, our International Economic Data Developer. We want to keep our webinars interactive, so we very much encourage you to post your questions in the question box as we are moving along. We will try to answer those in the question box. If we don't get to them, we'll answer them during our Q&A. And if you have any remaining questions, we'll make sure that somebody gets back to you after the seminar to answer those. During today's session, we're going to look at how IMPLAN now allows you to see Canada's economy, not just as 13 broad provinces and territories, but now as a detailed map of distinct economic regions. So we're going to look beyond analyzing British Columbia as a whole, for example, and see the precise economic DNA of its unique economic regions. So our goal today is to show you how this new sub-provincial data gives you the foundation to conduct smarter, more accurate, and more defensible Canadian impact analysis. So to do that, I'm going to start by covering the key characteristics of our IMPLAN Canada product. Then we're going to dig a little bit deeper into what these new sub-provincial economic regions are. From there, Ashley's going to take us through the methodology behind it all. And most excitingly, she's going to walk through several use cases that show us this new data in action. So as I mentioned, to start off, I'm going to look at some of these key characteristics of our IMPLAN Canada product. This product really offers a lot of flexibility and allows you to see the big picture impact across the entire country, or now with the sub-provincial data to analyze very localized impacts. This framework is built on the reliable foundation of data from Statistics Canada, and it's delivered seamlessly through our IMPLAN cloud platform. One of the first things that you'll want to know is the geographic coverage of IMPLAN Canada. So in the past, IMPLAN has offered aggregate national level Canadian data, as well as more granular coverage of 10 provinces and 3 territories. That changed just last night with the addition of the sub-provincial data, which adds now 76 new economic regions. This, as I mentioned, this new granularity really lets us analyze Canada on a much more specific scale. So it opens up opportunities to model and understand very localized impacts in Canada. Later today, as I mentioned, Ashley's going to show us a few use cases that demonstrate why this is so valuable and so important. So that covers the where, the geographic scale of our data. But of course, this is only part of the story. To really understand what you get with this product, we also should look at the what's made in the economy. That brings us to the second key dimension of our data, which is the detailed industry sectors. It's important to note, especially if you are familiar with our IMPLAN US product, that this IMPLAN Canada product covers a different set of industries. So it has its own unique industry scheme. And this includes 234 functional industries, and then one industry that accounts for taxes on products net of subsidies. There's a much more in-depth discussion of these industries, including a NAICS bridge to help you select the correct industry for your project, all on our IMPLAN support site. So today we're getting a pretty high-level overview of these industries, but there are tons of resources to help you look more closely and determine which industry might be the right fit for you. I don't want to dive too much into the world of taxes today, as much as that is so exciting to so many people. But because this is a distinct feature of our IMPLAN Canada product and our international models, I do want to highlight a little bit what this TOPS industry looks like. It is a function that, it is an industry that will be included in every industry's production function. So what this looks like in practice is that when you look at your results, you'll see your industry of interest paying out to this other industry. You won't need to do anything specific with this industry. In fact, you shouldn't. This is just for accounting purposes, and you'll still have the full range of tax impacts reported in your results. So the key thing to take away from this that I just want to highlight is that this TOPS industry is nothing that you need to do anything special with. You just need to be aware that it's there and know that it's strictly for accounting purposes. There are a few other key features that you should keep in mind if you're thinking about using our Canadian product. The first is that IMPLAN Canada represents all monetary values in Canadian dollars. So this means that it expects project inputs in Canadian dollars, and it returns all of its results in Canadian dollars. So we want to make sure you know what unit you're looking at. Second, the IMPLAN Canada product includes extensive environmental data. So I think this is definitely worth calling out, so it's not overlooked, the value of this. In total, there's data available for more than 200 substances, more than 35 minerals, and 18 greenhouse gases. And now this is all available at the national, provincial, and sub-provincial levels. Next, it's good to remember that IMPLAN Canada reports basic prices. So the easiest way for me to think about this reflects the way that the valuation scheme that we're using. And the easiest way that I think about this and remember it is that the basic prices reflect the amount that's retained by the producer rather than the amount that's received by the producer. Again, this is one of those topics that there's a lot of material available on the support site, and you're not expected to leave as an expert about this today, but just to keep it in mind and there are tools and things for you to dig deeper into this if you need more information. And then finally, the IMPLAN Canada data is released annually in accordance with the Statistics Canada data releases. Okay, so now that we've got the background information out of the way, let's dig into the star of the show today, right? Our new economic regions. I want to give a little bit of background about what these regions are and how they developed so you can understand why we're using them today. These regions, they were initially created in 1950 by Statistics Canada, and they were drawn in a way that captured areas of similar socioeconomic features, all within these regions. Over time, they've evolved to reflect the influence of major economic centers and to accommodate changes in the census division boundaries. So today, these economic regions are made up of smaller, for the most part, complete census divisions. There's one exception to that where census divisions are split. But otherwise, they're made up of complete census divisions, and they're all grouped together specifically to create this standard area for economic analysis. They're units that they're small enough to permit regional analysis, but large enough that the statistics can be released without issues of data suppression. So if you've ever tried to collect localized data or put together your own very granular data set, you know just how valuable it is to have this area that's already determined, already mapped out, and putting all of these together in a unit that's set up specifically for economic analysis. Because of the nature of what these economic regions are, and because each Canadian province has its own unique economy, geography, population, the distribution of these economic regions across the territories and the provinces varies. So we can see here that a province like Quebec has 17 unique economic regions, but the territories only have one economic region each. Now, I would go ahead and bet that many of you sitting here today aren't thinking about your analysis in terms of economic regions. You probably don't have these regions in your mind, or maybe you don't even know what these regions are. And that's fine. Our goal is to give you some tools to help you map what you're thinking about and how you're thinking about your localized economies to these new economic regions. This will be your very first step, right? Is to align your area of interest with the correct corresponding economic region that's used in IMPLAN. Fortunately, there's a nice tool from GeoSearch Statistics Canada, which we now have available on our IMPLAN product page, that'll help you do that. It's set up very nicely to allow you to search for your area of interest and then to demonstrate what the related economic region is. So here, as you can see, I've searched for Montreal. This is a specific census metropolitan area. And GeoSearch then provides me a list of economic regions. One of the interesting things we can see here is one of the characteristics of these economic regions is that they may divide census metropolitan areas, right? So we see here that this Montreal, the census metropolitan area of Montreal, is split up across 5 different economic regions. And now, if we were to open up our economic regions in IMPLAN, we would see these 5 and be able to select them for our analysis. With this, I'm going to turn it over to Ashley, who, now that we've seen what IMPLAN Canada looks like and a little bit about the economic regions, she's going to show us a little more about the data methodology and show us some potential use cases.
Thanks so much, Eric. So as Eric mentioned, my name is Ashley Bickel, and I am the International Economic Data Developer here at IMPLAN. And my role is not only to produce the annual Canada data and our periodically released international data, but also to expand and enhance our data product offerings. And that's why I'm so excited to be here to talk about IMPLAN's new Canada Sub-Provincial data. So before we get into our data sources and methodology, I want to take a moment to talk about why we chose economic region as a geographic unit for our sub-provincial data. We selected the economic regions for three main reasons. So as Eric mentioned, economic regions are the official standard created by Statistics Canada for analysis of regional economic activity. Perfect. By adopting this standard, we align our data with the most credible and accepted framework for regional economic analysis in Canada. Second, producing this data at a geographic level ensures full national geographic coverage. And perhaps more importantly, it maintains alignment with provincial boundaries. So even though I think there was a lot of demand and interest in having sub-provincial data at the census metropolitan area or CMA level, the problem with CMAs is that they can cross provincial boundaries. The most notable example of this is the Ottawa-Gatineau CMA, which spans the provinces of Ontario and Quebec. So a benefit of full geographic coverage is that analysts can move seamlessly from the detailed sub-provincial level up to the provincial or national level without encountering any gaps or mismatches. Finally, and most technically important, selecting economic regions as a geographic unit ensures that we have access to raw employment data from Statistics Canada that is definitionally consistent with our employment data that our IMPLAN provincial data already use, meaning the employment data is available for the number of the number of jobs, not the number of persons. This is definitionally consistent and it's vital for maintaining the accuracy of our overall input-output model structure. So in short, economic regions were a no-brainer. They provide the perfect convergence of official standardization, comprehensive coverage, and technical consistency. So before we get into the details of the data, I'd like to provide a high-level overview of our methodology. By and large, the Canada sub-provincial data production process is very similar to the data production process that we use for US zip code data. It's similar in that we distribute a higher level geographies data to a lower level geography using employment ratios and other distributors. So in the case of Canada, we are distributing the IMPLAN provincial data to the economic regions within that province. This is a multi-step process which first involves estimating employment by industry for each economic region. We then estimate other industry level data such as output and the components of value added for all 234 unique industries for all economic regions. From that point, we estimate all other model elements, including demand for goods and services by household and government, taxes and transfers, and the last component is estimating trade between economic regions. This methodology ensures that the entire input-output structure is accurately regionalized by distributing that provincial level data to the respective economic regions. And like our US product, the data is geographically balanced such that the economic regions add up to the provinces and the provinces and territories add up to the national Canada values. So let's first talk about our raw data sources and how we use those. Our primary raw data sources are employment-based, and we use two different data sources. The first is an experimental data series from Statistics Canada that provides labor statistics by economic region. As I mentioned before, this is the data set that provides employment data that is consistent with IMPLAN's provincial level employment data. This dataset reports the number of paid worker jobs as well as the number of self-employed jobs, which serve as our initial controls for the totals for the economic regions. However, this data is not industry specific. Industry detail is derived by combining the provincial and territorial economic account data with a custom Canadian business count data table from the Business Register. This dataset provides, for a snapshot in time, the number of establishments by economic region, by industry, specifically at the 6-digit NAICS level, and by employment range, which incorporates 9 different employment size ranges. So we combine these two data sets as the foundation for our sub-provincial data. And we combine this data in 3 distinct steps. So first, we develop initial estimates of employment for every economic region for all 234 industries. These initial figures are based on that highly granular raw data from the Business Register. Second, we take those custom-derived economic region industry employment ratios and apply them to the total employment figure for each economic region. And as we discussed earlier, employment in that economic region is segmented by employment type. So it has the count wage and salary employment and proprietor employment. These are the employment values that are definitionally consistent, and so we're basically just adding industry detail to these definitionally consistent data. The final and the most critical step is calibrating and balancing the employment data. So we use an iterative balancing method known as the RAS method. You can learn more about this on our support site. We do this for the US data as well, but essentially this method ensures total consistency of all of our data layers by enforcing 2 constraints. So for each industry, the sum of employment for all ERs in a given province must match the IMPLAN provincial employment for that same industry. Second, within an economic region, the sum of all of the industries within that region must match the total employment for that economic region, whether that be for wage and salary employment or proprietor employment. This process guarantees that the sub-provincial data is both internally consistent and perfectly aligned with our existing provincial datasets. While employment data is certainly a large and important part of an IMPLAN model, there are many other data elements in an IMPLAN model. IMPLAN provides all sorts of other information about the regional economy, such as the output or employee compensation for a specific industry, the demographics of the region, household spending, taxes and transfers, and more. So we need to estimate all of the remaining data elements. So in regard to all of the other industry level data besides employment, the primary distributor for regionalizing the provincial data is our industry and employment type specific employment ratios. We use these detailed employment ratios for all components of output and value added. So if an economic region has 12% of the wage and salary employment in a province, it will represent 12% of the employee compensation in that province. We then leverage other data, including industry-specific employment, total employment in the economic region, various value-added components, such as employee compensation or gross mixed income, which is functionally proprietor income, and other data, such as household counts, to allocate other provincial level data elements to their respective economic regions. So a great example of this is household demand. If a given economic region has 20% of the households in that province, they will represent 20% of the province's household final demand. This process ensures that the resulting IMPLAN model for each economic region is comprehensive, balanced, and ready for economic impact analysis. The final step in our methodology is to estimate trade flows. So we separate this into two distinct methodologies. For foreign trade, or trade between an economic region and the rest of the world, we maintain consistency with established provincial patterns. So this means that foreign imports and exports are assumed to make up the same proportion of gross demand for each commodity as observed at the large parent provincial level. This assumption ensures that the foreign trade relationships are consistent with known provincial and national trade profiles. The more complex element is domestic trade, or the flows of goods and services between the 76 economic regions in Canada. These internal interregional trade flows are distributed based on each region's net demand and net supply for every single commodity. This approach to domestic trade is the foundation that establishes the capability for conducting multi-regional input-output, or MRIO, analysis, which allows users to capture the spillover effects across regions. We have a ton of support articles on MRIO, and you can check out our support site at support.implan.com. So without further ado, let's take a look at some of this new sub-provincial data through a few concrete industry-specific examples in British Columbia. But before we dive into the data, I want to quickly remind everyone how to access the Canadian product within IMPLAN. This is particularly relevant for users that also have access to more than one IMPLAN product, like our US product or our international product. So to access the Canada data, you simply click on the Create New Project button, and here you would select the 235 industry set. If you would like to change your system default to always create a new project in the Canada industry set, you can change this in your user profile. Now, to access the economic region data, there are two ways that you can do this. The first way is via the map view. So on the map view, you simply right-click on the province of interest and select Show Economic Regions. It will zoom down into that province and provide the geographic layout of that province and where the economic regions are. You can also search for an economic region in the search bar in the top left. The second way to access the data is through the list view. Here, you would select the caret of the province you're interested in, which populates the full list of economic regions in that province. So today, we're going to look at data for British Columbia. We're going to look at 3 economic regions, Lower Mainland Southwest, Nechako, and Northeast. So just to kind of level set and get a little familiar with the economic regions in British Columbia, the Northeast economic region is obviously in the northeast part of the province. It shares a border with Alberta and Yukon, and it is the largest economic region in terms of land area. However, it's one of the least populous regions in the province. Only Nechako, its neighbor to the west, has a population lower than it. The Nechako economic region extends from the center of the province up to the Yukon border, and it's separated from the Northeast economic region by the Rocky Mountains. Nechako is the second largest in terms of land area, and it's the least populated region in British Columbia. The third and final economic region that we're going to take a look at today is the Mainland Southwest region. It's located at the southwestern corner of British Columbia. It borders the United States and is home to the Greater Vancouver area. And in contrast to the two others, it is the smallest by land area, but it's the largest in terms of population. In fact, this economic region accounts for nearly 60% of the British Columbia population. So we're going to take a deeper dive into the data, and we're going to look at employment in a few broad industries in these economic regions. So our first example that we're going to look at is employment in mining, quarrying, and oil and gas extraction sector. So if you look at the provincial average for British Columbia, less than 1% of total provincial employment is in this sector. But if you drill down to the economic region level, the story changes completely. In the Northeast region, this sector accounts for 12% of regional employment. And in Nechako, this industry accounts for 4.5% of total regional employment. Again, this is in contrast to the very populated area of Lower Mainland Southwest region, where it accounts for less than 1% of regional employment. So as we can see here in this first example, the provincial average is practically meaningless and masks the importance of this industry to regions like Northeast and Nechako. But with IMPLAN's 235 sector industry detail, we can dive in a little bit more. So we can see here the subsectors that are driving this, such as the oil and gas extraction sector, IMPLAN Industry 11, and the coal mining sector, IMPLAN Industry 13. We can see that those are very important industries in the Northeast region. Next, let's go ahead and look at employment in the professional, scientific, and technical services industry. This time, the concentration of employment is flipped. So the provincial average is about 8.2% of total provincial employment. And when we look at the Lower Mainland Southwest region, which includes Vancouver, that share is about 6% of total regional employment. Obviously, when you take a look at Northeast and Nechako, in the lower populous regions, the professional, scientific, and technical services industry is very small. It's 0.1% or less of total regional employment. So in this case, the provincial average is much more representative of the Lower Mainland Southwest than the other two regions. And this makes intuitive sense. So when we drill into that data, we can see the top industry for employment in this broad sector for Lower Mainland Southwest is IMPLAN Industry 184, Computer Systems Design and Related Services. This is followed by IMPLAN Industry 182, Architectural, Engineering, and Related Services. Finally, let's move on to our last example, and let's look at the broad agriculture, forestry, fishing, and hunting industry. So at the province level, this industry accounts for about 2% of provincial employment. But again, the regional perspective provides some really vital context. The Nechako region is heavily dependent on this sector, where it makes up over 10% of regional employment. This is nearly 10 times the share of that in Lower Mainland Southwest. Again, with the industry detail that we have in IMPLAN, we can dig into this data a little bit more, and we can see that forestry is the predominant employer with more than 1,000 jobs. We can also see here that the support activities for forestry industry also has about 400 jobs. Now, I want to note we're only looking at the first 10 IMPLAN sectors. If you look at the full industry set, you can also see that an important employer in Chaco is Industry 52, sawmills and wood preservation. So this level of regional detail is essential for conducting environmental impact studies or resource policy analysis, where you need to see exactly how dependent a small region is on a few key industries like forestry and logging. So I am going to pass it over to Eric here in a minute for our final remarks. But what I hope that these three examples demonstrate is the potential inadequacy of relying on aggregated provincial data for regional analysis. Whether you're studying resource extraction, specialized services, or agriculture, the economic footprint can be hidden within those provincial level averages. Eric, you may be on mute.
Thanks, Ashley. I was, so you all didn't hear a word I said. But thank you, Ashley, for that. Before I open it up for Q&A, I want to leave you all with just a few final key takeaways, and then we'll dive into your questions. So our goal today isn't to have you leaving here as an expert in our data production methodology or expert users of IMPLAN Canada, but rather we want to give you a picture of what IMPLAN Canada is. And we also want to provide you with a few key takeaways. The first is that IMPLAN Canada fills a critical data gap for this enhanced level of granularity. Now you have this built-in reliable Canadian data source that gives you deep sub-provincial granularity with detailed insights across 235 industries. This, if any of you, as I mentioned before, if you've ever tried to collect this level of data on your own, even for a small area, you know how incredibly valuable this level of granularity is and how hard it is to find them. The second goal today is to demonstrate to you that having this sub-provincial data now enables you to truly conduct advanced regional economic modeling in Canada. Because you can finally account for those crucial regional differences that Ashley just showed us, you can really unlock more sophisticated localized analysis and conduct things like our MRIO modeling. So when we put this all together, IMPLAN sub-provincial Canadian data, it really opens up the door for localized Canadian analysis. And as we just saw, if you're just looking at aggregate impacts, you really are missing an important part of the story. So this data today that we introduced, this sub-provincial Canadian data, it really gives you the precision you need to understand these regional economic impacts. With that, I'm going to open it up in just a second for questions, but I want to remind you of our resources available to you beyond this webinar before I do that. So if you want to dig a little bit deeper into this, if you're not an IMPLAN user yet, we encourage you to submit for a personalized demo. You can do this at implan.com/demo. On our demo, somebody will walk you through all the data inside the application, run through an analysis specific to your interests, and you can really get a feel for what all of this looks like inside the IMPLAN cloud. If you are already an active IMPLAN user but you have questions, you can always email our customer success team, support@implan.com. And finally, as Ashley and I have mentioned a couple of times already, we have a very comprehensive support site, support.implan.com, where you can get 24/7 support resources. We also have recordings of all of our past webinar sessions. The recording from this session will be up there. So it's really a go-to for all of our resources if you have additional questions once we get out of here. Okay, with that, I am going to go ahead and open up some of the questions, and Ashley and I will try to answer them. Let's see. It looks like one of the first is, how is the output of each economic region estimated in the sub-provincial model? We
Yeah,
know that
so
economic,
go
sorry,
ahead.
we know that economic activity isn't evenly distributed by population or employment share. For example, an economic region might have a small percentage of the province's households and workforce, yet still account for a larger share, say 70% of the province's output for a specific commodity. How does the model account for these kinds of regional specializations?
Yeah, this is a fantastic question. So our output is distributed by those industry and employment type specific ratios. Um, so it is very reliant on that employment data. However, as with all of our IMPLAN products, you can customize a region or you can customize the data. So if you know that the output does not fall in lockstep with employment, you can in fact model that.
Thanks, Ashley. Looks like we have a few more questions, so thank you everybody for posting those in the question box. This one is a three-parter. So number one, do you apply the same provincial IO multipliers across all economic regions within one province, or does each economic region have a unique multiplier for output, GDP, jobs, etc.?
Yeah, that's another fantastic question. So due to the data limitations, some of those labor statistics like output per worker or employee compensation per worker will be the same as the provincial level.
Okay. Part two, to calculate the induced impacts, do you use any commuting data between the economic regions within BC?
Oh, I am so glad you asked that. And that is one of the things that we will be looking forward to in the future in terms of a data enhancement is that our IMPLAN Canada product does not currently include commuting between provinces or between economic regions. Um, we have been looking for data sources to incorporate that, but we have not yet found a suitable solution there.
Great. So I think that answers maybe this third one as well. How do you account for the labor movements between the economic regions within BC and the associated induced impacts?
Yes, it does. Unfortunately, those are not incorporated at this point. If you have any feedback on either data enhancements or features of the software that you would like to see, we always encourage users to reach out to us, and that helps us not only in our planning processes, but also in terms of prioritization. You can submit a request at feedback@implan.com, and that'll go into our queue, and we can look for data enhancement and data expansion.
Yeah, and we do encourage you to send that feedback. We are always interested in hearing from our users about how we can better address your needs. Okay, now actually we have a couple questions about the event modeling. So the first asks, will modeling at the economic region level also provide event results for value added and labor income as well as employment?
Yes, it will. So all components of the traditional IMPLAN model, you will be able to see at the economic region level. Um, is there anything I wanted to add on that? No, I think that, yes. And I guess that goes into the second question, which is, will all events be available for analysis at the economic region? For example, industry output event or an industry contribution analysis event. And yes, um, it is completely scalable. Every feature or every capability that's available at the provincial level will also be available at the sub-provincial level. And as Eric mentioned, this also includes our environmental data.
Okay, another question. What kind of data gaps are there at the census division level?
So we are using economic region, which is a complete grouping of the census division level. So we are actually not obtaining any census division raw data. Um, we use our provincial and territorial economic accounts that has our employment at the economic region level. And then the business register data is also at the economic region level.
Hopefully that answered those questions in the chat, but you either are welcome to put more questions in there or raise your hands as well. We're happy to take questions that way. And we do have a few more minutes, so we don't want you to leave here without answers to your questions. All right, great. Oh, we do have one more pop in. See, I knew if I waited. All right, in light of some of the assumptions and limitations mentioned today, will there be an IMPLAN economic region disclaimer available so we can include it in our work?
Yeah, so in our sub-provincial release notes, we do talk about the data production processes and the data sources. We are currently working on an additional support site article that, here at IMPLAN, we try and be as transparent as we can about our data production processes. And so part of that is including the considerations and the caveats of our data. Certainly, the provincial data has a more robust set of raw data sources that are used in the data production process. But as we can see in this webinar, the provinces in Canada are very, very large, and the provincial level data may not be representative of the specific region that you're trying to look at or in which the economic activity is taking place. So it really is a trade-off, but we will definitely have some more support documentation on that.
Thanks. And as Ashley mentioned, it's very important to us that we're transparent about all of our data processes, and we really do recommend as well that in your reports, if there are assumptions that you've made with the modeling, that those are included in your reports as well. All right, it looks like we have some follow-up questions about maybe loading the economic regional data. So there was a question earlier about not being able to see the regional details for a lot of the economic regions. So I'm assuming that you are looking in your IMPLAN Canada product and you've opened up the economic regions and you just want to look at the region details, but you don't see the region detail access link. It should be showing up when you add that economic region as a group. You should be able to see the same regional link, so the regional data link, regional details that you see with other regions. Let's see, it says, oh, click to build the region. Yes, that is an important detail. Ashley, you want to speak to that?
Yeah. So when you first click on an economic region and you have not worked in that economic region previously, you will have to have IMPLAN build that region. So you can click on that build that region, and once that model is built, you will be able to access the data. It may take a few moments for the region to build, but
Yeah, and just to give a little context, since I know I threw those questions together kind of out of context. So the question was, when you are looking at economic regions or looking at any geographic region in IMPLAN, once the model is built for those, looking at the region details is an excellent way to get an understanding of the entire economic picture for the region. But with something like this, when you are first adding the economic regions, as Ashley just said, you may see a notification that you need to click to build the region. You will need to do that and let IMPLAN build that entire region and pull in all that data before you're able to see the region details. But once you do that, then you should be able to see the region details. You should be able to run a project, an analysis in that region, but you will have to build the region first. Okay, we do have a hand up. So Michelle, I'd like to go ahead and let you ask your question since you've been patiently waiting with your hand up. Do I? Let's see. Are you there, Michelle? And we are just not able to hear you. Looks like we have a hand down, so maybe Michelle does not have a question any longer. Okay. Thank you all for these questions. We really appreciate the participation, and as we've said, this is a great time to get your questions directly answered here while we're here. But if you have questions that come up after we leave here, you are of course welcome to contact us. One of those many ways that we suggested, either through the IMPLAN product page or through your CSM or your customer service support person. All right. Thank you all so
thank you
much for
all.
joining us today. We really appreciate it. Keep an eye out for future webinars. And if you have any other questions, check out our IMPLAN Canada product.
Thanks all. Take care.